Okay, good day everyone, and today we're going to do my third episode, which is on property investing, and especially in Iskandar, Malaysia. And today's episode is basically about why the Chinese and the Koreans are choosing to invest and to live in Iskandar, Malaysia. And I can say this with long experience because I've been in Iskandar, Malaysia for a long time, and we definitely see a lot of Chinese and Koreans there. In fact, we have very close relations with some of the Hong Kong, Chinese, Korean people and agents who are promoting and living in Iskandar, Malaysia. Okay, so let's start. Okay, about myself. My name is Ryan Koo, and I'm a Malaysian, and I'm Singapore PR, and I've been in Singapore since 2009, and I have a house I started to live in JB also in 2016. So today I travel up and down the border quite a fair bit. So I say that I'm quite proficient, right, or familiar with the market in both Malaysia and in Singapore. And when I say Malaysia, I mean I include KL as well because I was in KL since 2001. Okay, so I know KL for quite a fair bit, and basically what I do is I'm the author of two books on Iskandar Malaysia, which is what's the big deal with Iskandar Malaysia, and Are You in Iskandar too? And actually, basically, I'm a property investor. I buy sell property for a living. I help to market projects as well, and I help to recommend good buys for investors. Or help developers how to best sell their projects. Okay, and you regularly see me at events hosted by Property Guru or iProperty or ST Property or the Edge Property, where we talk about Iskandar Malaysia. Normally they call me for Iskandar Malaysia, so because I'm the Iskandar Malaysia expert, and we run a lot of events, write a lot of articles for publications, including Straits Times and the Edge, and I also regularly go overseas to talk about living, retiring in Iskandar, Malaysia. This photo is from one photo in Hong Kong where we are hosted by the MM2H Club in Hong Kong. Of course, nowadays there's a high interest from Hong Kong to look at overseas living because due to issues with China, and such sessions are very popular. Not always done by me. Many people go to Hong Kong nowadays to talk about this, but not only Hong Kong. I mean, today we're going to talk about China and Korea in general. Okay, so my own property investment experience. I started investing in property back in 2007, and today I think we transacted a huge number, of the over $250 million of property in Singapore and Malaysia, including my own. My company Alpha Marketing was formed to help as a consultancy to help advise owners and developers on property investment and management. We have a Facebook group called MISS, Malaysian Investors in Singapore. Today we have more than 10,000 members. I think it's one of the biggest, if not the biggest, property investment discussion groups on Facebook today. We have no spamming. We ban. We don't allow agents to simply spam postings. That's what normally happens on Facebook groups. You see a lot of agents simply spam. We don't have that. It's a very pure news sharing and discussion Facebook. A lot of people get their information there. Singapore or Malaysia property, and normally we cover some markets as well if they're familiar. But I think because we're Malaysians in Singapore, so and it's open to all nationalities. I mean, not just Malaysians, can be any nationality with interest in property. Okay, I have two businesses in JB called FY Design and IMBNB. FY Design is a design company, interior design. We help owners to furnish their properties, whether for rental or for stay. IMBNB is an Airbnb company, a hotel company, where we run properties on short-term stays. Okay, I'm also a property salesperson in ERA Singapore since 2012, and ERA Malaysia. Johor was formed this year in 2020, and of course, with a wide range of experience everywhere. Okay, so these are my two books. You can find them in most major bookstores. If you can't, especially the first book, which was written in 2013 and quite some time back, you can drop me an email or a text, and we can do a direct courier to you. I think that is better. Okay. My first investment in property was actually a studio apartment. This was in Bukit Bintang in KL, and it was a small apartment, 380 square feet at the time. When I buy, my parents was like wondering why you go and buy such a small house. But the reason was we saw a very attractive rental yield. Right at the time, I can get 12.8% gross yield. If anyone today tells you 12.8% gross yield, you don't believe, right? In today, in this year, 2020 today, it's almost impossible. I mean, to get a 12.8% yield on a property today, right? And I mean, Singapore commercial property, you're talking about commercial residential property, you're normally talking 3-4% is already very high, right? Malaysia now is about between 4 to 6%. So 12.8% was very high yield, and so I went ahead. We fully furnished a property. It's very important to furnish a property to get good rentals. A lot of owners don't understand this. By furnishing a property, you can push your yield higher. And normally the cost of furnishing, you don't have to spend too much. But this is another topic for another day. Yeah, and I held this property for quite a long time because the yield was so good. I mean, I didn't see any reason to sell, and but I finally sold it last year. And actually, for a long time, that was what I specialized in my property investment. I bought lots and lots of studio apartments. At one point, I had over more than 10, I think close to 15 studio apartments and one bedders, all owned under myself in KL area, and that was how I made my first pot of gold and how I got hooked into property investment, right? One of my more recent, I won't say my most recent, one of my more recent investments in Iskandar is a strata office. Now, Iskandar Malaysia in Singapore normally has a very bad reputation. A lot of people think that you lose money buying property in Iskandar. And actually, to be very honest, I think that's true. A lot of people lost money. I think especially if they buy around 2012, 2013 onwards, 2014, because that was the peak of the market, the peak, right? And unfortunately, a lot of people in Singapore who buy in Iskandar at the time, I think they were not sure what they were doing. Alpha Marketing, my company, we tried our best to give advice, and the market was very new. Iskandar was very new at the time as a property destination, right? So a lot of things, there was no data, we couldn't do it right, we have no past precedent to base upon a correct past precedent. So I think a lot of people in Singapore who bought property in Iskandar at the time didn't make money. But definitely people who bought property in Iskandar before that means if you bought in Iskandar 2007, 2009 period, you still make money, today, right? Because they got it cheap. They buy at prices which are very low, right? It's part of it is a cycle issue. Which point in time you buy the property, right? And actually, this property I bought in 2013, so also around end of 2012, 2013, so actually also around the peak period. But we bought something a bit different, which is a strata office. And the reason why we buy strata office was because there was no supply of strata office. Quality strata office in Puteri Harbour at the time. Well, everybody was buying apartments. This strata office project, we did a bulk purchase, about 50 over units, a group of us went and buy. And the strata office was a very low supply at the point in time. And we were quite sure that even if we were not very 100% sure about demand, right, but at least our supply we can control because we bulk purchase and we know who are all the owners. And actually, today, there was some struggle in the beginning, but actually today our strata office also gets a very decent rental yield, as high as 6.8% at one point. Today we roughly, I think our current tenant we are doing about five-ish, right? And the building is doing very well. I mean, a lot of tenants have moved in, and actually we're quite happy. I think this is probably one of our better performing purchases in Iskandar Malaysia, and yeah, right. So this shows you some of the things that we can buy that are normally not available in market. Okay, so back to today's topic. Okay, so why Chinese and Koreans are choosing to live in Iskandar, Malaysia, right? I think many of you heard this, and actually the phenomena of Chinese moving to other countries to stay is not new, right? You have seen Chinese all over the world today, Australia, US, Canada, right? A lot of Chinese are choosing to live overseas, and actually the lesser known fact is of course Koreans. I think the Koreans have also did very well as a country this past 5-10 years. Now Korea is a super strong economy. They are definitely a first world country already. I mean Korea and Malaysia were probably at the same level back in the 60s, but definitely Korea has gone ahead. And then I think part of it has got to do with the ability to manufacture and research products, because today you buy TVs and electrical appliances, Samsungs and LG, and and then you have cars made in Korea, Hyundai's and Kias, and these are good stuff, right? These are not poor quality things, and Korea has really advanced as a nation. I think very similar to how Japan was in the 80s and 90s. So in the thousands, in the millennial years, 2000s, I think Korea really stepped it up and made it all the way. And there's now a lot of rich Koreans who are looking at places where to park their money. China is similarly behind now, somewhere there now also today. We are buying everything is made in China. A lot of things are made in China, and China products are getting better quality day by day. And you have China cars, you have China phones, right? And China phones are also pretty good. Huawei's and all these are very good quality phones. I have one, and I think so. That's why you see the country is rich. There are rich people in this country, and they're looking at destinations on where to live overseas. So, but why Iskandar? So we talk about the MM2H program, the Malaysia My Second Home program, which is basically a residency program for foreigners in Malaysia. So if you are a foreigner and you want to stay in Malaysia for extended period of time, right, you can get a MM2H visa. So if you look at MM2H program from this website, imydaily.com, which is a great website for information on immigration, you can see that Chinese is the majority applicant, right, for MM2H in Malaysia. And you see Koreans also, which is the brown one. Okay, also fairly high. In fact, in many cases, Koreans are the second highest. In recent years, Korean are the second highest applicants of the MM2H program. It used to be Japanese, right? Japanese were the second highest applicants for the MM2H program, or the highest if you go way back. But now Koreans are now a high applicant of MM2H in Malaysia. So and MM2H actually as a program has been getting very popular. You can see the number of applications have increased a lot in the past few years. And if you look at MM2H compared to other residency programs across the world, actually MM2H is also a fairly popular program. You get a lot of applications compared to say Australia or Greece or Spain, other countries that have similar programs. Okay, so why? I think one thing good about MM2H is that the program is fairly easy to get. I mean, it's not difficult. The requirements are not high. I mean, the application process is a little bit long. Okay, you still take months to a year. All the discussion, application process, documentation, submission, the profile check. By the time you're done also, I think it will take a year. I mean, it's very fast also. I think it's 6 to 9 months, right? I think 6 to 9 months also I don't think possible today. But the whole discussion you can assume is 1 year, right? But actually the requirements are fairly low, okay, and it's fairly easy to get, and approval rate is quite high. And the other thing is that a lot of people like Malaysia as a residency, especially from China or Korea, because it's near to home, right? And you don't want to go so far. Sometimes you don't want to go so far away, right? So like Australia or like America is very far, and culture and climate, right, is still very more similar to home than other parts of the world. So that's why MM2H is fairly popular. And actually, even though I talk about MM2H, there's actually also a lot of Chinese and Koreans who don't use MM2H to live in Malaysia, and they use visas to travel, tourist visas to travel, and they come here for weeks. They go back months, and then they cross the border, chop passport, come back again. It's also fairly common, right? And because flights are so cheap today, right? That's the other thing. With low cost budget airlines today, right? Actually, travel is not expensive, and a lot of people, you'll be very surprised, really fly very regularly to live in multiple countries. But why? So why are Chinese and Koreans choosing Malaysia, right? To live in Malaysia. So when you look at from a real estate perspective, right? The reasons why Chinese people buy property in Iskandar is basically I have here on this slide. So number one is freehold, right? In China, you don't have freehold property. China property is all leasehold, right? And normally about 70 years. So overseas, they can buy freehold property. So Malaysia has freehold, so they're happy with freehold. Number two is they follow Chinese developers. A lot of Chinese developers have come to Malaysia, and so the Chinese developers recommend Malaysia to their clients, existing clients in China, so they follow. And then sometimes they make money from earlier Chinese projects, so they have a loyalty to the China developer, and they buy again to the China developer. The third point is Malaysia property, the quantum is smaller. You don't have to spend so much money. It's cheaper, right? And so a lot of Chinese can actually buy, rich Chinese can actually buy property cash. They don't need loan, right? And which comes to another thing later. Is that when you buy property cash, normally you have no financial stress. That means even if the property market goes bad in Malaysia, you don't really need to sell because you have no loan. You have no loan, you got no pressure, right? If your business turned bad in China, worst case you just try to sell the property cheaper in Malaysia, but you don't really have a pressure from the bank about paying the installment every month. You don't have the stress. So actually, one thing when you a lot of Chinese who buy property cash, people always ask me, would they mean the Chinese people don't stay here, the property price will drop because you don't stay here? So I know, but they buy cash. You see, there's no pressure. They just leave it, right? No, at worst case, they just leave it there, right? Leave it empty until the market is better, right? So small investment, the quantum is relatively small to buy, right? Number four is inheritance for children because it's freehold. So a lot of Chinese also think if I don't really use this property or make money from property, I can also give it as inheritance to kids. And especially if the kids come to Malaysia for education, or in case as a migration process, right? They come and MM2A should live here to study, right? Treat Malaysia as a second home, right? This property is something for them to use, right? Very common, you see this all the time, especially in Australia or UK. Same thing in Malaysia, right? I had a discussion that day with one a friend who was in the tourism industry, and he mentioned something that China has a hukou system, right? So, and because of the hukou system, a lot of rich Chinese who are not from the major province, from the main province, let's say you are rich Chinese, but you come from a smaller province, you're not from Beijing, Shanghai, even though your kids study very well, you can't get them into the main universities in China because they don't have a hukou for the university in China. So for those locations where the university is based, so you have to score extremely well. So if your kid doesn't score extremely well, you can't even go to these top universities in China, and they have to consider other places to study elsewhere. So sometimes they go overseas, right? Malaysia and Singapore has a top 10 native Chinese speaking descended population. That means a lot of our ancestors, like myself, our grandfathers and great grandfathers come from China, right? And Malaysia and Singapore are top 10 in the world for such Chinese. So when Chinese come to Malaysia, they feel very comfortable because they see that we are not just 5% of the population, right? We are like 25% of the population. In Malaysia, Chinese is about 25%. Singapore, of course, they are about roughly 80%. So when they come to Malaysia, Singapore, they feel very comfortable. More comfortable because they see many other people that look like them, right? And because the top 10 in the world, right? And we're not a small population. And the last point, of course, is that with the high-speed rail project coming in Iskandar to Singapore and MRT Iskandar Singapore, that is also something that Chinese believe in because China economic progress, one of the symbols of China economic progress is the high-speed rail. You see the high-speed rail network in China has grown a lot, and to them, high-speed rail equals economic growth, right? So they're very believe that in Malaysia. So back to one point. So as you can see in this slide, countries that have the high number of overseas Chinese is like Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore. But the interesting thing, as I mentioned about Indonesia, Thailand, Singapore, is that their population is much larger, right? So than Malaysia. So as a percentage of total population, is small, right? So like Indonesia, for example, has more than 200 million people. So you have 7 million Chinese in Indonesia. Also, you don't really see the 7 million Chinese, right? But Malaysia, when you got 6 million plus Chinese in Malaysia, as a percentage of Malaysia's 30 million population, it looks bigger. So it looks like the Chinese are more in Malaysia, right? So and this is the point about Iskandar being a Shenzhen, Malaysia Shenzhen to Singapore, like Singapore to Hong Kong. There's a very popular slide I like to use here. This is from my first book, where we share how Hong Kong economic growth power into Shenzhen. A lot of investments from Hong Kong went to Shenzhen, and similarly, you will see this happen from Singapore into Johor Iskandar, right? And the population ratios are actually fairly similar. If you include the high-speed rail, it goes all the way until KL. Okay. So Shenzhen back in the 80s, 90s is a backwater city, right? It's a fishing village, and then they were given free trade zone status. The Chinese government pushed a lot, and today Shenzhen is a huge metropolis, big, huge population, right? I think I can't remember the percentage population today, but definitely bigger than KL. And the important thing driving this actually is the RTS agreement. The first step, I think, is the RTS. Now, RTS is the rapid transit system, basically the MRT MRT train between Singapore and Malaysia, and both governments signed this on the 30th of July agreement. You can see this during the COVID-19 situation, and they signed it on the causeway. They have the line there where they don't cross the border, right? But so the MRT is construction will start in early 2021 and complete roughly 2025, 2026. Now that's the first step in getting Iskandar to really be like Shenzhen. Now, although although um, although we don't have the train today, but I mean, there are already many investments from Singapore, and this goes on to my next slide, which I show you how the train will look like. So you can see the RTS site, which is basically an empty plot of land next to CIQ, and you can see the MRT crossing over from Woodlands in Singapore over to the RTS site. So this is how it will be. So there's no train today. We only have two land bridges linking Singapore and Malaysia. And of course, the land bridge is jammed. Is said that it's one of the most busiest land crossings in the world. So when you have an MRT coming, a fast train coming, a lot of Chinese believe this is a catalyst for economic growth in Iskandar, right? So this is in the map, shows you roughly how the track will look like. So the trains, the MRT will be like an MRT in Singapore, trains every 4 to 8 minutes, 10,000 passengers every hour. So that's a huge jump. And a co-located CIQ, very important. I get some comments on our Facebook and YouTube that the problem is not the mode, the problem is the immigration. But one improvement that we will have is a co-located immigration. Okay, co-located immigration means when you enter Singapore from Malaysia, you chop passport one time at Malaysia, and then you go into Singapore. There's no second queue. You already cross into Singapore without having to queue a second time. Basically, both the Singapore and Malaysia immigrations will be on one side, so you only queue one time, and that will help to save a lot of processing time, right? Yeah, okay. So the big important thing is this is a map of Singapore's MRT network. So you can imagine linking one more station into Johor Bahru, and this will give you access to the entire Singapore MRT network, right? And one thing I like to say, of course, is that you can, by 2026, you can take an MRT from JB all the way to East Coast Park, right? In Singapore, I think that's a huge thing for someone. If you live in Singapore for a long time, you know what I mean. It's like almost impossible to imagine that you can take MRT from JB to East Coast Park. It's like a fantasy or some kind of theory, but it will happen. It is happening, right? In the years to come. So in JB side, of course, the obvious winner is RNF Princess Cove, and RNF Princess Cove coincidentally is from a Chinese developer, right? So they are from Guangzhou in China, and they have a project really just next to the border to Singapore, next to the first bridge, the causeway, and of course 600 plus meters away walkway to the MRT. But I covered this in my earlier video, so if you want to find out more about RNF Princess Cove, please watch my earlier video about this. Okay, so Chinese developers in Iskandar. So as I mentioned earlier, a lot of Chinese developers have come to Malaysia. Some are in Iskandar, some are in KL. Majority are in I think there's probably as many as in KL than and in Johor, right? So in Johor, the big three, actually Country Garden, RNF, and Greenland, right? All three have major projects in JB today. And as I mentioned, a lot of China buyers actually follow them here. They are the ones who promote Malaysia indirectly to China via their property projects. Okay, they promote Malaysia indirectly and then to China, to their Chinese buyers via the property projects. And of course, when you sell a property, you're not just selling a property. You have to also sell a lifestyle. Why if you buy a house here, what can you do? So they also talk about things like education, tourism, healthcare. Right, healthcare in Malaysia is very good and affordable. So they talk about things like this, so to attract buyers to come and find out why I should live in Malaysia. And indirectly that has also the reason why MM2H applications from China are so high, because China is a huge country, over 1 billion people, right? So even if a very small percentage apply MM2H, is a lot of numbers for Malaysia. Okay, so property prices in Iskandar have a huge gap to Singapore. So the big belief is that when the MRT is built, this gap will definitely narrow. It will not. The price differential should not be so big. I think Iskandar will catch up. Singapore, I don't think will drop, but Iskandar definitely will have to catch up. It's just how much. Okay. So again, this is a reason what Chinese developers always like to reference is that property prices in Shenzhen in a long time ago, and here they were talking about something that was built in 1981. And today the property in 2020 is now jumped over 5,000%. So I think that is the story referencing between Shenzhen, Hong Kong, and Iskandar to Singapore. and especially after the MRT was built. And this is a fairly important slide because you can see that Shenzhen property prices fairly flat for a number of years, right? Then after the MRT was connected from Shenzhen to Hong Kong, right? Then you can see property prices start to climb, right? And similarly, this is the belief that I have. Not only does the Chinese have, but I also believe the same thing. Is that property prices in JB will definitely climb once MRT is connected to Singapore. This is a guarantee. If if there's anything that can be guaranteed, right? Or I dare to guarantee, or if there's a way to guarantee, I think I can guarantee almost 99-100% say this is right. If the MRT connects to Singapore, definitely property price in JB will climb. The question is how much. So and in Shenzhen, of course, this is a much longer time period. The property has climbed a lot, but definitely you will see a climb once MRT is connected, like in Shenzhen to Hong Kong. So, and of course, in Shenzhen today, property prices are as high as Beijing. That's no surprise. The three big cities in China, Shenzhen, Beijing, Hong Kong, Shenzhen, Beijing, Shanghai, property prices are fairly similar. So, today Iskandar already property prices have climbed. People used to say Iskandar more expensive than KL. I said I don't think so. KL also has property that is very expensive, more expensive than Iskandar today. KL prices also have gone a lot. So, but again, Shenzhen can be as high as Beijing. So, no reason for Iskandar to be as high as KL. That will definitely happen as well. So the problem is actually connectivity. Today, the reason why Iskandar property is in a slump, right, is that we haven't really solved the connectivity problem. And then, of course, many people in Singapore blame the Malaysian government for not doing the job. And I mean, that's partially true. The Malaysian politics have been a bit unstable these past few years. And a lot of delays are actually caused by Malaysian political instability, right? But once we fix this connectivity, I think you will see the big jump happening, right? So the big difference today between Iskandar, Singapore, and Shenzhen, Hong Kong is a train, right? So everybody say, but my Iskandar property don't do well. Yeah, because the train haven't come in yet. The key thing is the train. We all need the train. We desperately need the train. So train, of course, there's two, as I mentioned earlier. One's the MRT. Second is the high-speed rail. The high-speed rail from KL to Singapore, right? So you can go KL, Singapore in 70-90 minutes. The other one's MRT, which is this is a Hong Kong MRT map. You can see Hong Kong links to Shenzhen via the train, and there's actually two exits in Shenzhen, Luohu and Futian. Right, I've been there. I've been to both sides. I went there myself a couple of years ago, and this is the key to making it work for Shenzhen. And people always say, Ryan, but I mean, you will still jam between between Malaysia, Singapore. But I mean, if you've been to the Shenzhen one, they also jam. Not to say the MRT there also very clear, nobody one, right? So, I mean, the number of people will increase to travel, so definitely they will still jam. So, I think to me, whether the number of people will still that travel cross border will be higher than today. Can you imagine? Higher than today, and the jam will still be there somewhat. The jam will not really go away, right? But at least more people will travel between Singapore and Malaysia when the MRT is built. Okay, so yeah, and again to show you a slide where Singapore property prices versus property prices in Johor. Big difference, big difference. Right? Singapore JB on top, you can see there it's only 357 PSF on average, and actually that's on the high end already in JB. Okay, this is I'm talking about higher end property where Singaporeans buy one, you can get much cheaper property in JB also. But I mean, if you want something near the train, roughly this is the average in JB today in Singapore dollars per square foot. And you compare that to the rest of Malaysia, you can see the price difference is very big, very big. Too big already lah. I mean, it's too big to be logical. Okay, just because no train. And the other thing is about high speed rail. Today you can see high speed rail from Hong Kong to Guangzhou already. Last time you had to take you can only take high speed rail. You can only take MRT. Last time it's 45 minutes. There's a saying from Hong Kong Central to Shenzhen is 45 minutes MRT. Now you can take high speed rail 45 minutes. Not go to Shenzhen but go to Guangzhou. Right, the high speed train is there. And similarly, we're going to do this high-speed train also from Singapore all the way to KL. And you can see the population here. This is a slide from Ho Chin Soon. Very good slide. Shows you the population linkage between all the major cities. And high-speed rail is going to be signed by end of this year by both governments. And construction should start should start also sometime next year. But I think complete, this one also will need another 6 to 7 years to complete. Hopefully be finished before 2030. But this is also a big thing as well to link Malaysia and Singapore closer, like how Guangzhou and Hong Kong is. Okay, so in Singapore, of course, Singapore themselves are also very serious in the high-speed rail. They've actually acquired 2 golf courses in Singapore to build the high-speed rail, Jurong Country Club, Raffles Country Club. These 2 golf courses were acquired by the Singapore government a few years ago to build the high-speed rail. So actually, Singapore government is just waiting for Malaysia government to kickstart on this thing, and we should know more by December of this year. Okay, and very important because these are some example of slides of how people get stuck at the border. This was in 2016. I still remember. I wasn't here, but when I saw the photo, I thought it was very interesting. These are all Chinese tourists. Somehow the organizers of the tour didn't plan properly or something, and too many tourists and jam like nobody's business, and somehow it clashed with Singapore school holidays. So that clash, that was a further worse. And then you can see 3 years later, this was in 2019, last year only, again a similar problem, jam, and then all the China tourists, they just got tired of waiting on the bus. They come down and they start dancing, do line dance. You know, this is very popular in China, right? If you see a lot of videos in China, it's a very popular thing to do. So they came down and do line dance because they wait in the bus so long, they got bored. They need to do some, move their body. They come down and do it. So it's a very common issue today. So of course we have direct flights to China today. Those days we don't have, but now we have direct flight from JB to Guangzhou, right? Of course, with COVID, we don't know when this will reopen. But there used to be direct flights from, and then also to Korea, to Seoul, there are also direct flights. Okay, so another thing is, of course, I talked a lot about property just now. Talk about quality of life. Now, KL and JB, top 20 Asian cities for quality of life. This is through a Mercer index, right? Mercer has a program where they survey quality of life across major cities in the world, and KL and JB are top 20 for quality of life. Okay, so that's something to say, right? I think lifestyle is one of the reasons I enjoy living in Johor Bahru. It's not as packed. The population density is good. It's not too high, not too low. Okay, and environment is good. There's a lot of space, right? And food choices, the cost of living is still fairly low relatively. And yeah, so this makes JB a very interesting place to live. So and this is one of the reasons why you see a lot of Chinese families, they go for long holidays abroad. Of course, this is before COVID, right? Where they go and spend 1 month, a few weeks, 1 month in a country or a city to enjoy the lifestyle and to see how it is to live in a city. Now, this happened also in Malaysia. We have seen it many times. We have these tour groups, and they come into Malaysia and they stay for extended periods. We're not talking about 1 day, 2 day in one city, then move to the next city. No, not that kind of tour. They come to JB and they stay in JB for days. Many days, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 1 month, we have seen before, right? And they come to experience the lifestyle, right? And as per what the article here says, there's a lot of things because they want to understand how to live in this country. Is the food okay? Is the cost of living okay? How is accommodation? How is education? Is it easy to get much transfer money to live here, overseas, from transfer money from my home country to here to live? Where will my kids go to school? Where to buy food? And things like that. So we've seen this very common in Chinese as well as for Koreans. Okay, so which comes to Koreans now. So why are Koreans in Iskandar, Malaysia? Migration and alternative way of life. Now, Korea, I think you may have heard, is also a very busy and competitive country. Like Singapore. Singapore is also famous for having a high suicide rate. Actually, Korea also is very famous for having a high suicide rate, like Japan. For some reason, a lot of countries, when they go to first world country status, right, suicide rate also increase because they're too stressed, right? So Korea is a place to be, and sometimes, like what Chinese also, they have difficulties to get immigration to US, China, Australia, Canada, Australia, because these countries are also tightening their immigration policy. Lower cost of living, right? Clean environment. I think this is something very clear. If you've been to China, you know what I mean. Environment in Malaysia, Singapore definitely is cleaner. We have cleaner water, cleaner air. In China, this is very common to get smog, right? Smog and haze. This is haze in a way. And actually, this happens in Korea also, because Korea is fairly near to Beijing. Korea is fairly near to northern China, where a lot of this air pollution happens. Malaysia has a lot of international schools. Same thing for Chinese, same thing for Koreans. They come to Malaysia international schools. In fact, the international schools in JB today, a high population are from Korea. Right, a lot of Koreans come to JB to learn English and to go for the English schooling programs, so the kids can go for university later once they graduate. Right, property prices are cheap, freehold is available, second home. Right, and then you must understand, Korea has and also China to a certain extent. Sometimes the reason why they apply for residency visas or overseas visas to live in other countries, because there's always this small chance. We say small, but it's like an insurance policy, right? You get residency program because there's a small chance of always security threat from North Korea, China, Japan, all that. As you know, South Korea, North Korea, China, Japan always have a bit of this tension between them, right? There's always at some point they're not happy with each other, and they threaten each other. Of course, nothing serious has happened in the past 50, 60 years, right? But, yeah, and then there was a very important thing that someone told me the other day is that Korea, we always talk about Korea, North Korea has a lot of missile, right? But someone told me the other day is that actually North Korea don't even need missile. If they want to attack South Korea, they don't even need missile. The long range artillery can really hit Seoul. Seoul in Korea is actually very near the border, fairly near the northern North Korea border, so you don't even need missiles. Actually, you can just open your artillery and shoot. I mean, if anything goes wrong, right? So, yeah, right. So sometimes all these Chinese and Koreans, the reason why they get MM2H is like a backup plan, right? So inheritance taxes, I'll talk about this later. And the last point is, of course, a lot of businesses in China and Korea today, they are looking to expand to Southeast Asia. A couple of reasons for it. Number one is a trade war. Sometimes they want a trade war of US, trade war of Japan. Also, that also happens. And sometimes they want to have a duplicate manufacturing. That means you don't want to be over reliant on one country to where all your manufacturing is done. Because nowadays a lot of people manufacture in China, but you worry about if China gets a lot of tariffs, so you don't want to have everything in China. You must have a backup plan somewhere. Southeast Asia becomes a choice, right? Because it's fairly nearby. So this slide is about, I took it from online. Is that it shows that the star, that sometimes the Beijing smog also can cross over to Korea, right? So Korea also doesn't have perfect environment scenario. And Koreans today in JB, they are very, very commercially active, right? Koreans come to JB, they ask me, right, what do they do in JB? I said, they open business. You'll be very surprised. A lot of Koreans come to JB and they open shop. They do something, and they don't just sit here and stay at home and do nothing, right? A lot of them open businesses, and we have seen this, especially in F&B, Korean restaurants run by Koreans. That's the most basic, simplest one. You also have factories, right, run by Lotte, MO Pacific. All this MO Pacific is a Korean cosmetics plant, right? And then healthcare, education, right? I talk about this in the next few slides. So, example, this is a Leaders Academy. This is someone that I know, and they opened a English tuition center. Basically, they focus to help Korean kids to learn English, because they come to school in Malaysia. They need to improve their English to be able to do well in school. So this is an academy they opened in JB, run by Koreans. The operators, of course, their English is very good, because they are the teacher, right? And then they teach other Korean kids how to speak English. And this is not the only one. There are a few of such schools in JB. Okay, it's not only one. Okay, clinic. This guy, this is a doctor from Korea. He wants to open clinics in Malaysia, wellness clinics, right? And they're trying to get licensing. Licensing is an issue because today Malaysian government don't recognize Korean medical degrees, but medical programs. But they're trying to get it through with MIDA now. And okay, inheritance tax. Korea has something called inheritance tax. Now, don't know whether you're familiar. Okay, what is inheritance tax? Inheritance tax basically means if you die, let's say you die, right? A government tax your wealth before you can pass it to your children. Okay, so I repeat, if you die, government will tax your wealth before you can pass it to your children. Okay, now Malaysia, Singapore don't have inheritance tax. Okay, Malaysia, Singapore don't have, zero. Okay, but Korea has. Now the reason why government do this is they want the rich people to pass all their wealth to the kids, right? So the kids all become rich blindly, right? So the government say we cannot let rich people automatic pass their wealth to their kids, right, when they die. So government will tax you now to make sure that to help redistribute the wealth, so that the rich don't become too rich, and you can take the money to go and do other things for the poorer people or for the country. Okay, so now in Korea, inheritance tax. Now, if you notice, at 2.7, the last year, which is 2.7 million US, and this includes hard assets. My understanding is include hard assets, include property. So if you have assets 2.7 million US and above, if you die, right, and your kids inherit your what do you call that, your wealth, right, the inheritance tax is 50%, 50. That means half of it pay tax. Then your children only get the balance. So example, you got 3 million US. If you die, right, the kids get 1.5 million US only, because the 1.5 million US taken by Korea government. So actually, this 2.7 million US is not a very, very high tier, to be honest. I mean, I don't want to talk as if we are very rich or whatever, but 2.7 million US is actually not a lot of money. It's a lot of money, but it's also not a lot of money, right? So 2.7 million US, 50% already. Okay. So a lot of Koreans in Korea, they're not happy. The rich one, of course, the rich one not happy. So they say, how come so much tax, government trying to take my money, right? So they're trying to move the money out of Korea or put into things where they don't have to pay so much tax. Okay, and this one example is in the article that, or something that happened to the Samsung family, the Lee family, a few years ago, where of course you Samsung, you very hard to run away, right? You're Samsung, everyone knows you're rich. So it's just how you hide your money. So they also have to pay about 6 billion in taxes, right? No choice, because this was inheritance tax. Okay, so this is one reason why Koreans are also looking at ways to put money overseas, property or whatever. Okay, and this slide is an example of a place is in Sunway Iskandar. Sunway Iskandar is in JB, right, near in Medini, right near Putri Harbour. And you can see this is a slide I did up myself, where I want to show you so many shops being operated by Korean people. Okay, hair salon, barbecue, massage, supermarket, Korean supermarket, right? They sell Korean products. They import directly from Korea and they sell here, because the Koreans cannot get their own stuff. You know, you may have seen Korean mart before, right? I think this is another Korean mart in JB, right? And Korean Taekwondo Academy also. So this is in Sunway, right? And to show you how many Koreans, I think I was told that they may be as high as 5,000 Korean families in JB today, and they even have a church. They're building a church right now, also because they want to do Korean church. So many Koreans are Christians, so they have a Korean church in JB also. Okay, so Koreans today is the #1 nationality in Iskandar Putri area. For rentals, they rent a lot of property because their children are going to schools there, international schools, tourism, businesses, right? And yeah, so it's a big contributor to the Iskandar economy. Okay, and of course, going back to this thing is something we should post in the MISS Facebook, right? Is that everything end of the day, Iskandar is very driven by high-speed rail and RTS, right? And this slide which I put here was a news that was announced on September 16, where Bandar Malaysia, which is where the final station for the high-speed rail will be in KL, right? Finally, they achieved a major milestone where the developer who buy the land managed to put his down payment, got his financing all done, so they can start work. It's very important because you need to settle this also, because if you don't build Bandar Malaysia, the high-speed rail station there in KL, right, also got no way to stop, right? So this is a very important thing. So I'm very glad, very happy that they settled this, because it also means that high-speed rail, in a way, has one more step forward, because they can finally build a high-speed rail also, and by end of this year, right? So if you want to find out more, do join our MISS Malaysian Investors in Singapore Facebook group, right? There's a lot more news there, right? And another interesting thing is that also announced recently also in September in 2020, is that Chinese developer MCC Land. Now MCC Land is a Chinese developer, but they have been operating very long in Singapore. They develop a lot of projects in Singapore, a lot of condos in Singapore, and in Malaysia they're actually more of a construction company. But recently they just signed a joint venture to develop an 8 billion plot in JB, right? Actually it's Skudai. Skudai is a suburb of JB, right? And township development, right? And this is a long time that we have seen this is the first time in a long time we've seen a Chinese developer come back to Iskandar. Chinese developer, I think, came to Iskandar up to 2014, 2015 was the latest. And for 5 years, I think we didn't see any more Chinese developer come to Iskandar. But recently, this year, 2020, I think they got a good deal, this JV with Iskandar Waterfront. They're coming in to run this township in Skudai. And if I show you the map, this is actually maybe you can't see that, but this this is the plot they're developing. It's actually just next to Paradigm Mall along the Skudai Highway. So Paradigm Mall is a very successful shopping mall in JB today. So they're going to develop. This is one of the last major plots. As you can see, the area around it all fairly developed already. Only left this plot which is not really developed. Okay, so Chinese developer coming here. So we are very happy to see Chinese developers come back to Iskandar. I hope that means there may be a resurgence in property development in the years to come, right? Because normally one good sign of property investments when more developers come back into the market, that normally shows a boom is coming, right? And we are quite happy to see a Chinese developer come in, so that may signal something for property market in 2021 onwards. Okay, so I want to end the presentation by saying that Chinese and Koreans are here to stay. Although COVID is here, COVID will be gone by next year, hopefully, and or at least controlled by next year. And then we still, a lot of Koreans and Chinese are still in JB right now. I know I'm in JB right now. They're still here. Of course, some have left because of COVID, but they will come back. Their houses are here. They will have to come back, right? And they will learn. They will adapt. But there are enough, as per this video, reasons, push and pull reasons for them to come to Iskandar. So for Singapore, I think the next wave for Singaporean buyers will most likely be nearer to after the RTS completion in 2025, 2026. Okay, so end of the day, Singapore's land scarce. So connectivity to Iskandar Malaysia is very important. You give a lot of spillover to Iskandar. Iskandar will also help Singapore a lot in that manner by providing resources and people. And this is my belief. And this is the reason why I encourage everyone to consider investing in Iskandar Malaysia, living in Iskandar Malaysia, doing business in Iskandar Malaysia, because definitely there are a lot of opportunities for people who are willing to be a bit more open-minded and look at things properly, rather than just believe everything blindly in the papers and what your friends say and what and all these people say who don't know whether they know what they're talking about or not. So completion of RTS in 2026 is a major milestone, and I think once RTS is completed, my job is done. Right? I don't even really need to promote anymore by then, because once RTS is complete, I think everything will fall into place naturally. Okay, thank you. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe our YouTube channel, or you can come and join us on Malaysian Investors in Singapore, or can go to Alpha Marketing website to register on our email list. Please leave any comments, if you have any questions, or drop me an email. You can contact me at the numbers below, or email me at the email below if you have any questions, or you need to find more. Hope you learned something from this video today about why Chinese and Koreans come to Malaysia, and definitely we have more to share in future episodes to come. Thank you very much. Thank you.